This whole series, which is based on Pope Francis's encyclical letter. It's called Fratelli Tutti, two beautiful Italian words, which mean we are all brothers and sisters. And this evening, as Father Ben says, we're going to focus on this question of immigration. What a sticky question this is for our country. It boggles my mind to think that we almost find it impossible to develop a policy which is just and equitable for immigrants who come to this country, especially because we are all immigrants. Everybody's an immigrant. The founders were immigrants. The framers were immigrants. And how we come together to put together such a wonderful structure for our country. And yet we struggle to figure out how we're going to include others in it. So tonight we are blessed. We are blessed to have Stan Marek here and also Lauren Steffi. The two have done their book. And as you know, the book is entitled Deconstructed, an insider's view of illegal immigration on the building trades, I encourage you to read that book, get it for yourselves, and because you're going to see in there why Stan is so outstanding. The Second Vatican Council spoke of the church as the people of God. And they said, in this people of God, we have a whole variety of vocations. And all of these vocations are relational. A bishop isn't a bishop without the people. A priest isn't a priest without the bishop and the people. Deacons aren't deacons except they're serving the people of God. All of the baptized are called to follow Christ with their own unique vocation. And all of us are called to deepen our holiness, our call to holiness, which simply means that we let the love of God pervade us wherever we are, in whatever we do, in whatever fashion our particular vocation and charism is shaped. A charism is nothing more than a special grace given us for the building up of the body, for the building up of the common good. So tonight we're focusing on Stan Marek. And Stan Marek is a unique kind of a guy because he embodies precisely what the lay apostolate is today. Every lay person, because of their baptism, is called to make some contribution to building up not only of the church, but of the entire community, the secular world. So Stan shows us, really, and you're going to hear it in the conversation, how to join faith with culture. How do you live your faith out in a society which has cultural institutions which are political, economic, and social, and which yet have to be touched by the one commandment that Christ gives us? And the one commandment that Christ gives us is love one another as I have loved you. That one commandment has implications across the board for every aspect of the culture or the way of life that we choose to live as Americans. We have a great country. We have a great constitution, unique, absolutely. It boggles my mind that the founders were able to put this together. And yet we have to discern together how best to apply it and to live it. Stan is doing this. Stan takes all of his deep faith, all of his formation as an Aggie, by the way, he's an Aggie, I'm going to point that out to you, as someone who is working in the market economy, taking all of his know-how to see how the structure of the economy can help, and how he can help the economy by taking the principles of faith which respect the dignity of the human person, that each person has the quality, the capability of doing good work, which then in that good work builds up the entire community itself. So we're in for a very, very lively discussion this evening. And I think that when you hear Stan interacting with Lauren, and you see how the two work together and how this book was born, I think it's going to stimulate us to think more deeply, not only in light of principles of faith or the market economy, but the application, the practical ways to get both feet on the ground, to include more people, help them make their contribution to this country, and at the same time offer them the possibility of living a better life, at least economically and so forth, that they are looking for, and create families for themselves. So I've said enough, but each time I hear Stan talk about this, and I've known Stan for 30 years now. I met him very early on and he's been dedicated to this for 30 years. I have never seen patience and perseverance in anybody as deep as it is in this man, because when you can only imagine trying to talk to people who are involved in the political dimension of this life and call them beyond narrow self-interests or potential re-election or non-re-election, to look at something very deep here with regard to what can make this a stronger republic. So without any further ado, let me just say a little prayer and then they'll come up. Why don't you come up now and then I'll say the prayer. Come on, Stan and Lauren, thank you. Hey, Stan, you go over there, and Lauren, you're gonna go over here. And then Father Ben told me I'm going to sit to your right. I don't know why, but he told me I'm going to sit over there. So let's just pray, okay? Oh God, you are the living God. You love the world which you have created, so much so that you sent your only begotten Son, that anyone who believes in him as being the full revelation of your love to the world will find the road to salvation. Your desire is that all may be one, as you, Father, are with the Son, and the Son is with you. And to give us the capacity for that oneness, you have breathed on us the Spirit, your Spirit, who indwells us, opens our hearts, challenges us to be the Good Samaritan upon the way, to go beyond borders and boundaries, and to think of the other who is not included. In our reflection tonight, in our discussion, expand our hearts so that we too can aid this country in becoming more inclusive, more expansive, more understanding of people who are seeking the way. We ask your blessing on Stan and Lauren as they enter into this dialogue, and upon all of us who will participate in the discussion which follows. We ask all of this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you all for coming. I have the easiest job in the world tonight because I have to get Stan Marek to talk about immigration. I should say that my job is not to get him to stop. So, Stan approached me, 5 or 6 years ago, I guess, about doing a project on immigration. And I'll be honest with you, I'm a native-born American. I didn't really understand much about how the immigration system worked. The great thing about being a writer is you get paid to learn every day, and I've learned a lot since I've been working on this project. But the original approach that I took as a business writer was one of economics. We know that what has made the American economy strong for many, many years is the influx of immigrants over the entire time of our republic, really. But we also know that during that time, immigrants have not always been welcomed. My ancestors came from Germany in the early 1700s, and Benjamin Franklin said terrible, terrible things about my people. We were taking up all the good farmland. We weren't assimilating. We weren't learning the language. Sound familiar? And that was something that I learned early on as I started working on this project and tried to figure out how to structure it. And what I realized was the construction industry, which Stan has been in, has historically been dominated by immigrants, both as workers and as business owners. Stan's own family, came here, started a company from nothing. And really, in many ways, the story of the Marek Company is the story of immigration over the last 80 years. And so that was kind of the jumping off point for the book, was using Stan's own experiences as kind of a narrative thread to help people understand how we got to this point. And so it was a very gratifying experience for me as a writer. I learned a lot. I think, Stan, you may have found it a little more frustrating because you've told the story a number of times already, but maybe just start out by talking a little bit about why this became such a passion of yours, and what was it that sort of drew you to the debate, if you will.
Testing. Is this on? Can you? Okay. All good questions. And first of all, Father, thank you for your much too generous introduction. I'm not worthy, as I kept telling myself, and when I think about why I do this and why social justice is so important to me, I've got to go back to Assumption Grade School, the Dominicans, St. Pius High School, the Dominicans, and my biggest fans, the Dominicans. Seems like any Dominicans here? I don't see any of y'all. Oh, there you are. Okay, and then the reason. First of all, Lauren, when he wrote the Chronicle for all those years, was a very talented writer. I always enjoyed his articles on business and immigration and the economics of it all. It just made sense. And I've been involved a long time, much too long, and seen so little fruit from my labor. I mean, this is a political football, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're trying to bite off little pieces of that elephant and make a difference for some people. We're never going to solve the whole thing. This term comprehensive immigration reform is a misnomer. I don't think there is such a thing. It is too big, too complicated, and it's too divisive. But for me personally, we built a company. My dad and his brothers came out of Yoakum, Texas in the late 30s. My grandfather lost everything during the Depression, and they were homeless for 4 years. And I had a chance to start hanging sheetrock as laborers, and it was a living. It was better than being behind a mule with a plow and you're relying on the weather and all the things that farming brings to the equation. And when they came to Houston after WW2 and started their business, it was an immigrant company, but it was Poles, it was Czechs, it was Germans, it was Italians. And like my dad, he spoke Czech growing up. I was the first in my family to grow up speaking English. Hard to believe. But all those cultures after World War II assimilated. They fought. They didn't like especially the poor German boys, even though they may have been here 3 generations. We fought the Germans. A lot of these guys came back from WW2. One of my uncles in the trenches with artillery. He hated the Germans, but it all worked out. And then as the company grew, and like every construction company, like many companies in the United States, are Latino and wonderful workers, family oriented, craftsmen by nature. They know how to build things. It's innate ability. And we hired a lot of those workers, and it was all great. Everybody had a Texas driver's license. Everybody had a Social Security card. And as after 9/11 and all Homeland Security, ICE, it all changed. And the workers really after 1986, the last major legislation, there's been no the Immigration Reform Act. There's been no way for millions of people to get legal status. So they're working off the books, and that's what we talked about. But as I got into this with Lauren, I just realized for our company to survive and for us to provide the hourly employment, the training, and the benefits, the retirement that we've been doing for 84 years, the immigration can destroy us because all these workers are here, but most of them are working in the underground economy, being paid in cash, not contributing Social Security. I want to talk more about that, but the reason I wrote the book is for the people, because they need a voice, especially the undocumented workers. And we've had to lay off a lot of outstanding workers because we found out through ICE audits or insurance audits that the ID they had was not their own, it belonged to somebody else. And that is really hard when you've got a partner, 20-year partner, that you have to say, we have to let you go. And when ICE comes in and tells you these people are not authorized to work in the United States, the first thing you think is, well, they're going to deport them. They don't do that. They just won't let them work for me, but they'll go work for somebody else. And it doesn't make any sense. So the book was written for our people, for our industry, and not all construction workers are undocumented. And in some trades like mechanical, electrical, and plumbing that are life safety issues, there's extensive schooling, and that's good. In the interior trades like concrete, drywall, ceiling, paint, flooring, you don't really have licensing. We do the training, the employers do the training, and if you don't have employees like a lot of my competitors, you don't do any training. You just hire them, and you learn OJT, on the job training. So it's a complicated issue. But I want to get into that small part that we're making a difference with. You might want to talk about rest of it. Good time for that. What do you think?
Well, I was going to ask you a question before we get into that. This issue of the shadow economy, workers who leave your company, they go to work for somebody, maybe they're making half as much, they don't get the training. Why is that a problem? I mean, one of the things you hear about immigration is people say, well, employers just want people to work for less money. They want people to work on the cheap. What happens long-term when we have a system that does it?
Well, when you have a system where everybody is an independent contractor, like maybe an Uber driver, or where they don't really have an employee-employee relationship, they don't get the training. We pride ourselves, number one, on safety. I mean, the projects we work on, like the hospitals, opera halls, they're dangerous. Job sites are dangerous, and safety is paramount, number one. And then skills training. Somebody that is trained to do a particular function does it better. And the big problem we have in construction is doing it twice. So many people, when they're not trained, make a mistake and it has to be redone. There's estimates of 20 to 25% of projects have to be redone because the people don't have the skills training. So when I started out in the trades, I was actually a union carpenter, 4 years of training. And that was really good training. And that all went away in the 80s. And there's very few companies like ours that does the same training, because we have found that a trained worker is a productive one. He's not only safe, he's productive. And in construction, where about 70 or 80% of everything you build is labor, that is huge, that you basically have a good, efficient labor. And I have watched the degradation of the trades, especially in residential housing. And that is all independent subcontractor. Nobody has an employee-employer relationship. And it's amazing they can build the amazing houses that they do. But if they were trained, if they had constant skills betterment, they would do it for less money. Our housing has gotten expensive because the workers aren't trained. And on the commercial side, unfortunately, that's what's happening on the commercial side as well, as people get away from the employer-employee relationship. And you say, well, why do people do that? Well, think about an employer. Okay, I hire Larry and I'm going to pay him a good wage, because otherwise he's not going to work for me. And Social Security, I'm going to 7.65%, $7.65 of every $100, and I'm going to match that. For Social Security, that's 15% that goes to Social Security. Then we have Medicare, Medicaid, all that good stuff, unemployment, hospitalization, if we provide it, workman's compensation, all that goes away if the person is not an employee. Uber, and I pick on Uber a lot because I don't like that arrangement. I mean, I think those people, if you're not an employee, you're self-employed, you should pay self-employment taxes. but most of those people don't. And the government doesn't do anything about it. IRS is totally ineffective when it comes to collecting money from individuals. It's ridiculous. And so we're getting down the weeds a little bit, but what was your question?
Well, I think you answered my question, but I want to kind of move into something else that you, yeah, but you talk about the employer-employee relationship, and that's so important. You know, at a company like Marek, you have employees that have been there 60 years. It's unbelievable, the longevity. You know, but talk a little bit about that, because that's part of what's being lost here. It's, you know, I think where you're going with the Uber thing is the lack of benefits, the lack of basically support that a lot of us who have, you know, full-time jobs take for granted. And what are the societal costs of that when you don't have, you know, people with access to health insurance, people with access to workers' comp, you know, and things like that? How does that play out? What's the impact there?
Well, it's a public charge. You know, we have to take care of the healthcare, the hospital system. And it really gets complicated with the undocumented because their provider of choice or out of necessity, the emergency room. You know, they can't access primary care. They're scared to access primary care. And the taxes, you know, I don't know how many of you are on Social Security I am, and I like it, but there's no way that system is going to survive if we don't have more young workers paying into the system. And this whole gig economy thing that Uber started, and a lot of people are doing it because it saves money. If you're not paying payroll taxes, that's 15 cents in every dollar that goes somewhere else besides the government. It gets worse and worse. And we've got a lot of issues. And, you know, if you think about after WW2, there were a lot of companies that started in business. And how did they start? With employees. That's what built Marek. It wasn't the Mareks that built our company, it was our employees. And we cherish those employees. My dad's always told me, and I tell my son Dan, that company exists not for the owners, but for the employees, because that's what built the company. So I hate it as a country that, you know, we're getting away from developing employees. And you know, when I talk about fighting off a little piece of this immigration issue, the one thing Lauren and I are really zeroing in on. Why don't you talk a little bit about, if you're ready to talk about rational, how we started that, why we started it, what it's led to with ID tax.
You're asking the questions now, is it?
Be sitting here, not be sitting there.
So one of the things that grew out of the book project that Stan and I did was we had an opportunity to partner with a video production company called The Rational Middle. And we've actually done a series of short videos that are available for free on YouTube that look at various aspects of the immigration issue and try to break off pieces of it. Some of the things we were just talking about, what's the impact on healthcare? What's the impact on business? What's the impact on education? Those will be episodes that are being released very soon, I think in the next few weeks. And that'll wrap up our second season. So there's what'll be about 16 episodes, I believe, altogether. And there's over 120 podcasts. We do a weekly podcast, which allows us to deal with issues that are very much in the news, changes in policy and things like that. So it's really a way of taking the book, which is a static thing, and broadening it out and you know, trying to take the message further. So as a writer and publisher, it's been interesting for me to participate in that. But I think it also helps us to reach another audience. And kind of to Stan's point, when you're looking at some of these impacts and some of the policy changes that are going on, you know, some of this stuff, even though we're not really making progress on you know, a solution, a lot of the things we're dealing with, such as right now, the debate over Title 42, the Remain in Mexico program, things like that, you know, are very much in the news, and they're having a huge impact on people's lives. We don't have the resources to report all those stories ourselves, but there's a lot of great stories that are being done that we link to. We have those guests on our podcast. We have those reporters on our podcast to talk about the stories. And so, you know, if you read the book, and I hope you do, that's not the end of the story. It goes on online. You can go to rationalmiddle.com and see all the things we're doing there.
Yeah, I think what I realized after doing this for 20 or 30 years is, our first thing we did back 25 years ago was get very involved politically. I was on the board of the Greater Houston Partnership. We had a group called Americans for Immigration Reform. We'd fly to Washington. We'd meet with Pelosi. We'd meet with McConnell. We'd meet with all these politicians, Cornyn, Kay Bailey, and everybody's going to promise, oh, we're going to get this done. We're going to just give us some money. You've got to be elected before I can help you, Marek. I don't know how many times I heard that. And we raised money for a lot of these people, and nothing, absolutely nothing got done. And I realized, and Lauren helped me with this, that the only thing that we can do, we the people, grassroots, we all got to get involved. And the whole purpose of Rational Middle, my elevator speech, is to educate and empower voters on the immigration issue and provide political cover for our elected officials. Think about that. So these videos, they cost a lot of money to produce. Now, I've had a lot of friends contribute to the cause because people really would like to see this solved. But it's not going to happen in Washington unless we, the people, make them do it. And you can't do it all at once. You can't do it all at once. To us, the most important thing right now are the kids. DACA has been floating around out there. It's the 10th anniversary coming up. Yep. And all those kids, and I've got a bunch of them working for me, and they're great, great young men and women. 740,000 have signed up, given all their information to the government, fingerprinted, jobs, doctors, lawyers, and they're scared to death. They're going to be deported. And that's not right. But at least they're working and they're contributing. There are another 2 million who are eligible for DACA. 2 million kids that we put through elementary school, middle school, high school, and in many instances, college. And when they graduate, they can't get a job. I'll tell you a little story real quick. We're always looking for people. And one of my workforce development folks came in and said, look, we're going to go to 2 of the lowest performing high schools in Houston, HISD, Austin and Millbridge. And we're going to get with the counselors. And we're going to get 25 kids that counselors telling us that might be able to do construction or want to do construction, and they're not going to graduate from high school. Not because they're not smart, because they got to go to work and support their families. So we picked 25 kids. We had a great 2-year program set up with HISD and HCC, Houston Community, where they would go to school half a day at the high school, learn their ABCs, and a construction lab at HCC on the Gulf Freeway, where one of our 40-year guys who got a teacher certificate teaching them in a trade. Beautiful. Summertime, they're going to work for $13 an hour, which I found that was more than some of their fathers make. And when they graduate, they're going to be making $32,500 with a high school diploma and a college certificate from HCC. Beautiful program. Kids loved it. My people loved it. Got through the first 2 years, 2-year program. 18 of the 25 left. That's not bad. Not bad at all. So we have a big signing, a big ceremony, and bring their parents in, and all the school people, Maldonado's patting everybody on the back. Principals are really excited, and then we got to put them to work. And my HR person comes in the next day and says, Stan, we got a problem. So how can we have a problem? Stan, 8 of them are undocumented. How does that happen? I go to the principal, and they said, the law says we cannot ask parents or the kids. It would discourage them from educating their kids. And that's violating the law that was passed. And it's a good law. And it's right. They don't need to tell you. And we can't ask. But it was horrible for me to have to sit down with each one of those kids and say, look, you've done everything right. You're a tremendous individual, but we can't hire you. Some of those kids didn't even know they were undocumented. Now, how can that happen in this country? And it's not happening just with me. It's probably happening over and over. When you think about those 2 million kids, what they're doing, they're working in restaurants, cash. They may be working in construction for cash. They have no career. They get no training. And a lot of them get angry. They join gangs. They act out. I don't blame them. So we're putting a lot of our emphasis this season on DACA. We've done a video on DREAM Act and on how this is impacting our schools. And the other interesting thing was those principals were very apologetic super great people. One of them had graduated from Austin, got her master's and her PhD, was principal and just delightful. And I said, look, how many of your kids, 2,000 in each school, do you think are on document? So I know what I do. They looked at each other and said 40%. 1,600 kids that one those two schools. You know, and I just, and you think about the money we're spending to educate those kids, and our politicians don't have enough guts to pass a DREAM Act. And Cornyn's one of the worst. You know, he has to be to the right on immigration for all his primary opponents and for the peoples he's supporting in midterm elections in Congress. He's got to be to the right. He can't reach out and get with a Democratic senator and say, let's do this DREAM Act thing. He won't. And I call him like I see it, and that's what that is. So that is a big issue. And but with we have a solution, and it's an adult document. It's an ID and tax. I mean, we got 11 million people here who are in the country. Many of them, most of them, have been here over 20 years, some 30. And why can't we just? We're not going to deport. They're all essential workers. And during the pandemic, all the construction workers were essential. And we're not going to. Why can't we at least ID them for national security? Do a background check, fingerprinting, and then let employers hire them like me and pay taxes on them. Common sense. They all agree, don't they?
Well, and you know, to that point, it's not just a question of hiring them and paying taxes. The societal change that comes about with this. If you have somebody who has a job, who has an employer who can vouch for them and say, yes, we're issuing them a paycheck every week or every 2 weeks, they can open a bank account, they can get a car loan, they can get a home loan. You know, these are things that we don't tend to think about, but it drove home to me at one point when we were working on the book. Stan invited me to the company Christmas party, I guess you call it. It was huge. It was what the Knights of Columbus Hall in North Houston. It was probably 1,000 of your employees there. And we were walking in from the parking lot, and he pointed and he said, you see all these new trucks? That's what employees do. Employees buy new trucks. When you're not an employee, you have to go to the used car lot and get whatever's available, whatever you can afford to pay for in cash. There's an economic ripple effect here, and it affects all of us, whether we realize it or not. We have allowed for 30 years these 11 million undocumented people to be here, to live in our society, to participate in our economy, but not to fully participate. And so what Stan is getting at with the ID and tax, it's a way for bring these people out of the shadows so that we can get the full economic benefit of immigration, which is something that has always made our economy strong. It's something we're lacking right now because there's no political will to change it. What we have, you hear a lot of politicians love to throw around the term amnesty. That's the thing. Oh, we can't have amnesty. Well, guess what? We already have it. We've had it for a long time because we allow the system to kind of go on and act as if it isn't there. It's basically amnesty. It's just not really working for anybody. It's not working for the immigrants. It's not working for the employers. The only people it's working for are the politicians because they can use it as a political weapon so that they get reelected.
That's well stated. If you think about the debate on immigration, you've got the 15% on the left that are amnesty or nothing. I mean, it's just, we got to have amnesty. And you got the 15 on the right that's just deport them all, build a wall. Well, that's 70% in the middle. And that 70% is not making their voice heard. A lot of it is our primary system. You know, when you have 7% of Texas voters voted a primary, the candidates are going to be far to the right or far to the left. They're not going to be in the middle. And maybe they come back to the middle when they get elected, if they get elected. But that's a problem. The primary system needs to change. But what we've tried to do, and the ID and tax we're proposing is not a path to citizenship. I'd like for there to be a path to citizenship. I think once they get their legal status and are contributing like dreamers, they'll get a path to citizenship. But the political will in Congress is not to do that. I don't think you could get people to agree on a path to citizenship. We might get them to agree on the ID part because of national security and on the pay taxes part. It's interesting, for every 1 million people we can take out of the underground economy and put them on a W-2 payroll, that's hourly working for an employer, If you do the math, it's 4.75 billion per year for Social Security. That pays a lot of Social Security. And if you multiply that times 10, if we were able to get 10 million of them, that's really a lot of money. And since these are the economic arguments that make sense that no one wants to listen to because it's a political football. And what we're going to try to do with rational middle, and I encourage you, just Google rational middle immigration, you can pop right up. We're going to try to, we call it our four pillars. One, education. We've talked about this. I mean, this is our future workforce. And we not only need to do something for the undocumented kids who are here, 2 million. We have 5 million undocumented parents, 5 million American-born kids with undocumented parents, 5 million. They're raising our workforce, and you know, we don't give them legal status. They're scared to go to school. They're scared to access health care their kids are eligible for, and they're scared to call the police if something happens. I mean, it's broken. So education is going to be a big deal. Second is health care. On this video, a lady named Elena Marks, who's president of the Episcopal Healthcare Charities, talks about how problematic it is when people show up for health care and we don't know who they are. You know, electronic records don't work if you don't have an ID. And during this pandemic, you know, how are we being sure we're getting everybody vaccinated? Who wants to be vaccinated? And our healthcare costs spiral because we were having to do too much in the emergency room, and that costs a lot more than just primary care. Now we got some great health clinics like Legacy and San Jose, but it's just not enough. 700,000 people in Houston who are undocumented. 700,000. Go into Reliant Arena, hold 70,000, fill it 10 times. Put yourself at a football game, 70,000 people, and multiply that 10 times. That's how many undocumented we have in Houston. I mean, that's crazy. We let this happen. So that is a big one, healthcare. But another big one is law enforcement. We've got people out there that are scared to report crime. If they see a crime in progress and they're illegal, they're not going to do anything about it. They can't. They're scared to death. And then the illegals who get taken advantage of, they, you know, thank God. Well, no, you still have a lot of check cashing places where people are waiting for the immigrant to cash his check so he can be robbed, and then they don't go to the police. I mean, the things that these people have to live with, it's just not right. And we're making it happen. And you make these arguments to these politicians, their eyes closed. It's not about what's right or wrong. It's about being reelected. So we're trying to expose all of this through our Rational Middle series. And of course, employment, we talked about that. We're trying to explain. Right now, we all need workers. I need hundreds of workers, and I can't hire them. First of all, it's tough to get them out of school because you're probably educating half undocumented. That's discouraging. I haven't found a way to poll the class. How many of you are legal before I spend all this money on you? You know, it's terrible. We got to do it. Can't do that. And there's so many really, really good workers out there that have been in this market 20 years who have skills. And what do the politicians want to do? Oh, well, let's go get some H-2B1 visas. Let's bring a whole bunch more in from Mexico to fill these jobs. And we got them right here. It doesn't make sense. So hopefully, you know, on our first season, we only had 5 million views, and it ought to be 50 million. And you know, I encourage everyone we talk to, go online, look at the videos, like them on your Facebook page, get them out there because they make common sense. And ultimately, I would like to think a politician will stand up and say, this is the right thing to do. I hate to plug anybody's book other than Lawrence, but I did read a book that I was extremely impressed with by Will Hurt called America Recruiting. I don't know if y'all remember Will. He was a congressman out in West Texas for 3 terms, 10-year CIA president of the A&M student body, racially mixed, African-American father and white wife, yeah. And he is one impressive individual, but he talks about America was created with compromise. It wasn't created with the far right. It was created with compromise. We've lost the ability to compromise in DC. And you know, when you call or send a email or letter to Cornyn, our crews, or any elected officials, you got to talk about, you know, get us to the middle, ID and tax, we need to do something about immigration. This is only going to get worse. All the people coming in here now, they're coming in here for a better life. It's terrible. It's happening. Terrible. We can't do anything about it. Lauren and I aren't even going to touch that. That is way above our pay grade. But we really need to ID the people who are here because they will help with that situation. You know, they don't really want more and more people coming in illegal. If they were legal, they would want people to come in a legal way. We've got to find a legal way to do this. And it's not a wall. You know, I don't know what the solution is, but it's a mess. It is a mess.
No, I think that when it comes to the politicians, the point that I always try to make to people is the reason that they are not taking this issue more seriously is that they only hear from the extremes. Because it is not an issue if you're in the middle as a voter, you may feel that, you know, we need DACA or we need reform, whatever, but it's not the thing that drives you to the polls. And so the politicians aren't hearing that. And I think that it's important on people in the middle to speak up, to make it clear that this does matter. You know, ultimately Stan's talking about his company, the construction industry, but it's not just one industry. We're seeing these same issues crop up across the board. You know, agriculture, food production, food processing, even manufacturing. You know, we're talking about very large and fundamental industries to, you know, to our national economy. This has huge implications. If it goes on for another 30 years, we're going to be in a really tough spot economically. So it's something that we need to start thinking about. If you're a native born American, it may seem far removed. Immigration is complicated. It's the second most complex part of our legal system behind our tax laws. So it's hard to understand. You know, you often hear people say, you know, well, what part of illegal don't you understand? And anybody who says that probably understands nothing about this because it is very, very complicated. But I'd encourage everybody to get involved. And you know, at the risk of shameless self-promotion, you know, the book is Deconstructed. Buy a copy. You know, watch the videos, listen to the podcasts, get involved.
And one point Lauren made that I want to reemphasize is, you know, you look at the census this last time. You know, we're at a negative birth rate now, and without immigration, we will not be able to maintain our GDP. And the first thing we need to do is take those 11 million out of the underground economy and put them on tax-paying jobs. That would help a lot. Think about 4.75 billion a year alone going to Social Security. And if you do make all of those 11 million consumers finance a house, finance a car, 11 million people, that is a huge impact on our economy. So, you know, immigration is what built this nation. And as I look around this room, I see a lot of immigrants that are incredible contributors to our society. Makes it a better place to be. And I don't see that changing. I think we just have to be realistic. As a country, we have to elect politicians who will be in the middle. I think we'll see more politicians like Will Hurt coming out about the middle, and the rational middle, because that's really where we need to be. Do you want to ask some questions, Padre?
Well, I have to tell you that I'm enjoying being educated. This really is an eye opener for me, and I'm certainly going to watch what you have. Is it YouTube that you're on? It's on YouTube. Yeah. What I liked in what you said at the beginning was, do not talk about a comprehensive immigration policy. It would be impossible. And what you have helped me to do is see really practical ways in which to begin to make my own contribution to the betterment on several issues. And I think that's the most important thing that I would like for all of our audience here, both online and here today, is for us to understand, because I'm ready to follow the leader. I mean, you set me on fire. I mean, I want to do something for this thing because of my own frustration, as you say, which comes from the polarization of the two extremes, and nobody coming in the middle. I think this is probably the most frustrating thing for middle America, that we can't find people who can come to the middle and take up one or two issues in order to better this program. Now, that's my own response to what you said, but I think we ought to open it up to some other questions.
I do want to.
You want to say something else? Go ahead.
Development of the view, Father. When Linda Laurel interviewed me for the video, I was so impressed with Linda that we've hired Linda now. And Linda will be promoting the Grafton Middle series through the Center for Houston's Future, the Baker Institute, and anybody else we can partner with. So if anybody wanted to do a seminar or symposium at their companies or at their churches, Linda can help with that to get it set up. We've got to get the word out there. And we spend these videos cost 50 grand a pop. I mean, they're not cheap. They're very, very well done. When you spend that kind of money, we got to get it out to the public. And we really like to have one go viral, you know, like this video I sent my son and my wife about the dogs. A video like that goes viral. You know, dogs doing cute things, but unfortunately, immigration doesn't have that kind of following.
Let's see if there's any questions, because Stan can go on all night. Yes.
Thank you so much. I have thought about and read different things. I'm glad you're doing that. My question is a little bit cynical. Is not part of this the fact that many employers don't want to pay more tax, Social Security or healthcare? So they pay cheaper under the table and they get away. It's sort of like an extended indentured servitude.
There is way too much of that, Father. It just, you know, why employers want to do that. Well, first of all, some employers do it because they can't find legal workers. No, it's just they can't find legal workers, and they pay the undocumented very, very well. But others, and you know, it's in this economy right now, you can get all you want. I mean, there's so much work, but what frustrates me is like in Austin, we have an office, and all my guys pay taxes, and they find out that one of our competitors is advertising on the internet 60 hours a week, no taxes deducted, $25 an hour. So we pay them probably 27, 28, but we take taxes out. And they'll quit me and go to work because of the 60 hours a week. They don't get paid overtime. They don't pay payroll taxes. And then I call the Internal Revenue Service and say, hey guys, can't y'all do anything about this? No, you know, we're too busy and they're undocumented. And if we ticket them to tax court, we can't get anything. It's a waste of our time. And that's the kind of stuff just drives me crazy. And a lot of that goes on. And you know, I call Cornyn's office. Oh yeah, we'll do something about it, but it never gets done. I mean, this is a big machine, this country, and they're going after the big companies for not paying income taxes, but they're forgetting that if you don't enforce the laws, people are going to take advantage of it. And the worker ultimately, even though he's making great take-home pay, it's not a career. I mean, he's going to have to go look for another job when that one's done, and that's sort of constructive. That's not being cynical at all. That is being very realistic, and I wish it wasn't that way, but it is.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is not only will he go to the next job, but if he gets injured, then he just can't work.
Goes to the ER. Too much pay for it in the ER because it didn't work. That's the other thing.
You know, I think that you know, there's always going to be unscrupulous operators in every industry. There's no question. But if you create a system where employers can legally hire people, the bulk of them are going to do that, and people like Stan are going to hold their feet to the fire. You know, it levels what we're talking about here. Stan's idea for ID and tax would level the playing field, and it would give employers, you know, a common ground to work from, and it would give the workers, you know, a better situation, you know, in terms of their employment, their careers, their longevity, and everything. So, will it root out all corruption and you know, dirty dealing? No. But it would get us much further to an equitable system than we have right
now. Besides the 11 million people that is here already undocumented and you can, you know, bring into the workforce, do you think a better or modern or more comprehensive bracero program like we had when I was a young fellow will be of help of what we are talking about. Again, the bracero program was very, very bad at that time, but maybe we can make one now in which the people from Mexico, from Guatemala and so forth, they don't want to come and live here. They want to come work and be able to go back to the families and so forth. And again, if they are documented, pays taxes and everything else, it may help as well as the immigrants that are already here.
Well, it would be nice if we could do that legislatively, but it's so dysfunctional, Congress right now, that that's not even a possibility. And if you think about it, you got 11 million people here. We need to regularize their status first. I mean, they came here illegally, yes, but they've been working here. They were essential workers during the pandemic. They're good people, 98% of them. And to me, they deserve the first shot. And then we have a way to bring more people in to fulfill the needs. But I tell you, being around those people in Congress, it's almost hopeless. And I was with one of my colleagues, Beto Cardenas, at the partnership the other day. We were at a meeting, and he's been doing this as long as I have. He said, you know, Stan, this is hopeless. This is totally hopeless, but we can't stop. Can't let up. You know, because there have been some things in our country, the Bracero program. After World War II, you know, we gave all those people legal status, and then we deported them, you know, after a period of time, which was ridiculous. But that's just how dysfunctional our government is. And but that's certainly a good question.
You know, it's interesting. Our immigration system has always been this sort of, you know, there's always been this tension. We recognize the economic benefits of immigration. We actually, you know, historically, we talk about people coming to, you know, through, you know, this under the Statue of Liberty and, you know, all this stuff. We have this very romantic view of immigration as sort of this historical thing that happened, but our laws have always been designed to work against it. Our laws have always been designed to keep people out. And what we really need is an immigration system that, you know, encourages people to come here. We need people, as Stan pointed out. Our birth rate is it's not going to sustain us. So we actually need a system that makes it easier for people to come here and to have some sort of legal status, as opposed to, you know, trying to figure out all these ways, you know, building walls and doing all these things to keep folks out. But I don't think that certainly in this political climate, no one is going to address that. That's just, you know, far beyond where we're at. I mean, we have, you know, 80% of Americans believe DACA should be codified into law, and we can't even get that passed by the people in Congress. So that's what we're up against. It's just a really, really unfortunate political environment.
My questions, Stan, regarding education. You know, you talk about undocumented migrants, about 11 here in Houston. And I think out of that, they have been basically getting a lot of informal kind of training for the works that they're doing. They do a lot of building the infrastructure of our society, but nobody acknowledged that. And actually think that you have been providing a lot of kind of training skills for them to be able to become the working force for the society. But I just wonder, how much do we really take a long look at our contextual situation and really have a long view of solving the problem? Because these documented kind of migrants have a lot of children, and these children are the future of our society, and these children need to be educated. If not, then they get stuck with a lot of problems, you know, with gangsters that you talk about, and with a lot of problems that because of the lack of education, lack of formations, and then generate a lot of social garbage and causing us have to go around and gather a lot of problems and solving the problem. So I think in a way, I think, does America have some kind of much more in-depth study of the whole issue of immigrations and providing some proposal for us to address the problem in a long run, not simply, I'm watching on the news. I think it's a very short view of the situation and trying to provide a better solution to the problem, but no one really go deep into it and then really study in the long run, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, what we should do. And actually, all of the people around us are, like we say, even here, migrants, and then fortunately, some of us are legal and we got a chance for education, but a lot of them, they don't get a chance. Like most of the contract workers actually are beautiful people. I just love them very much. And actually, all of the people here at our university, the people of the faculty department, actually they're wonderful people. And the last the kind of dialogue we have with the president, that we should provide opportunity for these workers who are in the faculty department to get further education. To be able to advance themselves and to climb up the ladders in society, not simply providing a life living for themselves, but also for the future generation. I think that's so important. So education is important, but I think it seems to me like we excluding a lot of these undocumented migrants, and that's one of the big problems that we have to handle, to deal with, and to have to take a long loving look at it, like Father Nesti mentioned, so that we can provide a long-term solution to the problem.
I totally agree with you. There's a lot of research that's been done by a lot of big organizations, think tanks, et cetera, universities. But if a person doesn't have legal status, none of it works. And that's the problem. They got to have legal status. And the politicians don't look at the data. They look at what it's going to take to win my primary. That's all they care about. That's it. And
Thanks again, Stan, for this presentation. I've always enjoyed over the years learning more about this from you and your passion for it. It seems to me, as a person of color who has experienced this country trying to understand civil rights and human rights, that the same situations we've had to try to get America to have compassion and empathy for the plight of the colored Negro, Black, African-American person is the same challenge we have now with getting people to care about immigration. The lessons we've learned from the civil rights movement is exactly to your point of the need to organize the community, to organize the voters, to organize the citizens, to first care about those human beings as human beings. It is a lack of empathy. It is truly the lack of empathy. Empathy is the road to equity. There is no equity without empathy. And so the challenge, it seems to me, because you have all the data and research, you have all the numbers, you have all the economic cases that can be made, you have the intellectual cases that can be made. It seems to be that the case that has to be made with the citizens and the voters to put pressure on elected officials is to get them to develop a sense of equity, a sense of empathy for these people. I know that to be true because I'm on the founding board of a charter school in the Gulfton area, Cerninos. We have 2 elementary schools, a middle school. We broke ground today on the high school. And the parents in the Gulfton area tell me all the time, the thing that you talk about, how they have to, the disrespect they receive, how they have to hide, have to, all those things. And the thing that they say the most is people talk to them like they don't exist, those people. It is a us and them situation. Maybe as we do the videos and we do the podcasts to talk about all the things you lay out so well, maybe there's another movement and another kind of presentations that need to be developed on how to truly figure out how to get people to care. Because right now what I sense is a lack of care about and concerning the issues that affect those people. And long as it's couched in those terms of those people. And what I find interesting about the conversation about those people is the same conversation I see happening in other areas around public urban education for children of color, be African-American or Hispanic. There is a total disconnect. It's not a mean-spirited discussion. I'm not going to harm them. I'm not going to do anything to hurt them. I'm just not going to do anything to help them. It's not even racist. There's just a total disconnect for those people, those children. And it seems to me that it's a heart issue as much as it is an economic and intellectual issue. That to get the voters to get compassion and to get excited and to become advocates with their elected officials, to put pressure on them to do the right thing, to do the humane thing, is the only way this is going to happen. Because you have made and continue to make now for 25, 30 the best case statement of why we should do this. But it hasn't penetrated. It's all here. It hasn't gotten to here.
Well, like Linda said it well to me the other day. She says, "Stan, you gotta have a story.
Yeah.
You gotta, and one of the things we're considering doing, I've got about 8 doctorate kids that are just tremendous, you know, with all University of Houston, Texas A&M. They're all scared to death. If I can get them to do a video, tell their story. We talked to one of them, Jose, who his dad came here to work and then brought his mother, left him with his grandmother for 4 years. And then his dad finally raised $15,000 to have him smuggled in to the United States, which was very traumatic for him. And now today, his mother, you know, had an American-born kid, his brother, who was able to get her citizenship, but he's still illegal. And I'm anxious to get Linda with that group and see if they'll go online. I mean, they're scared that they'll be targeted, and you know, it's just so sad, those kids. I mean, when you have personal relationships with them, like I do, you know, Jose went to KIPP. He was a high performance guy at KIPP, you know, and here, you know, it just, Larry, you say it well, if you treat it as those people, you know, they're sort of the shadow people. You know, we got to change that something.
I would just add that an interesting thing we encountered when we first started looking at doing the rational middle, and we were working on the format. You know, as a journalist, as a writer, you know, I immediately thought, oh, we have to have, you know, the story, the anecdotal lead, if you will. But what we found out at that time, there were actually a number of video type things that were being done that were telling immigrant stories, and there was actually a backlash. You know, we're trying to change minds here. We're trying to bring people to the table, and you know, quite frankly, especially those on the right, or that are right of center at least. And what we found, we did some market research and stuff, and people would stop listening because they felt like the immigrant tale of woe was manipulative. And so we actually tried to make a more economic argument, because we thought that would have that sense, you know, the sort of the pragmatic argument might resonate. But I think that we've all gotten increasingly frustrated with the fact that, you know, there are these great stories to tell. And so we're kind of coming back now to telling more of those stories, because one of the things we've seen across the country in communities where immigrants, you know, whether it's refugees or others that have been, you know, the refugee program resettles immigrants in different communities. And while obviously there's strife there can be, when people connect, as you say, on a one-to-one basis, it changes the discussion. There was an amazing story, I think it was out of Oregon, where it was a small town and the sheriff was Latino. And, you know, everybody was like, oh, we gotta, find all the undocumented and send them home, and, you know, all this stuff. And then their sheriff wound up getting deported. And a lot of the people in town were like, oh, wait, we didn't mean him. You know, and that's really kind of what happens. If you can establish that personal connection, it changes the discussion. But it's very hard when you're talking about policy solutions to get people to think that way. And you're right, that those people factor is really hard to overcome.
So good afternoon. My name is Cesar Espinosa, and I am a DACA recipient. I've met with Mr. Marek several times, and I'm good friends with Larry. And so, number one, I wanted uh, to underscore the fact that at least with DACA, 20% of DACA recipients have bought homes, and 74% of us went and bought the shiny new trucks to get around and stuff like that because we had licenses now. So very things that we couldn't get before DACA, we were able to get now. So I'm really excited that this conversation is happening and that more people have seen the videos since the last time that we spoke. An idea that I had maybe is for the 10-year anniversary of DACA is maybe to highlight those DACA recipients. The 10-year anniversary is to highlight those DACA recipients that you have working for you, because I think people forget. And then the question that I had is, during COVID, there was a lot of DACA recipients who were able to go into nursing, paramedics. Has anybody done a study, or do you all maybe consider doing a study or running numbers on how many DACA recipients are actually in the healthcare field? Because last year we had a case of a doctor from Pakistan who was about to get deported right in the middle of COVID, and it was a huge deal because what a crisis moment to now say, because of our broken immigration system, we're going to take these two hands that are helping us get people better and send them away. So is there any study or anything that
I'm sure
you
those
have talked about?
statistics are somewhere. I haven't seen them, but you might even Google that question, and you might be surprised what you would get. But I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with Doug Dawson at St. Luke's Baylor and Freddie Warner at Memorial Herman. They're dying for nurses. I said, guys, why don't you get all of your political guys with all the major hospitals together and go to Cornyn and say, look, we need an executive order that if a DACA eligible kid, boy or girl, gets a nursing degree, they'll get a green card. Oh, great idea. Of course, it never got anywhere. It may eventually, but we need nurses so bad. You got 2 million kids out there in a pool that have all been educated in our schools. Some of those kids would probably go get a nursing degree or a teaching certificate to get a green card. I mean, that to me is low hanging fruit. It's almost like more stuff we say that is just common sense, the less sense it makes to politicians. Which is
to your point, we actually did a Rational Middle podcast episode that talked about some of the research that's been done with regards to the undocumented and the healthcare industry. I want to say it was somewhere in like between episode 50 and 60, maybe. It was early on in the pandemic, but we did actually address that. If you give me a card or something or contact info afterwards, I'll find the link and send it to you.
Combination of what he was talking and believe it or not, I am going to be 80 years old this coming December. So I was born in 1942. I was living in Juarez, Mexico, and we used to cross to El Paso. And at a time, we were not able to sit in the same place in the Woolworth supermarkets that were at that time. We needed to sit in some other places. And there was some restaurants that had a sign said, no N-word, black people, no Mexicans, no dogs allowed. That was something that we could see every place. The positive thing that I want to say is that 20 years later, after I finished medicine school and some training in Mexico City internal medicine, I came to Baylor College of Medicine, my wife too. Both were trained, me as a neurosurgeon, Sylvia as a physiatrist, and we were able to practice here for 30 years and so forth. So my point is that, yes, the things are kind of not very good right now, but there were wars in the 1950s. And we have we have improved with all these negative politicians and so forth and things like that. So I believe there is some hope for a lot of people that they may be able, with the work that you are doing, hopefully we will get there. But we are better now than we were in 1950.
Hi, I'm a daughter of a drywall worker who finally did the American dream. So shout out, I wouldn't have gone to college if it wasn't for a really neat scholarship that we got from his boss. Also honored to be the first woman speaking today. My question is kind of touching on the point around the importance of hearts and minds, right? Uplifting narratives of the business community, uplifting narratives of the students, of the workers. While we do that and organize change at the federal level, what are the policy solutions that we can be implementing at the local level while we figure out the mess that is the federal immigration system?
Well, immigration is definitely a federal issue. State governments, Texas is the most anti-immigrant state in the nation. And we have the most immigrants. That doesn't really make any sense. And we rely on those immigrants for everything. But everybody has to be the right to win their primary. And a lot of business associations really are ineffective because they're trying to impact a national policy on either a local level or even on a national level, but they don't really get into the immigration issue the way they should. It's just not, if you look nationally, there's probably 47 states that immigration isn't a big issue. And they've got maybe 100,000 and they're nicely spread around working in the meat plants and doing very essential work. But you take Texas with 2.5 million, California with 3 million. In California, they treat their immigrants a little different. You can get a conditional driver's license if you're undocumented in California. If you work in the Napa Valley, you can get great housing and get paid $25 an hour to take care of the vineyards. What we would do with our wine, right, Mike? And so, but it's a democratic state, and they're not anti-immigrant. Florida is just little Venezuela. I mean, nobody speaks English there. So it's a big issue for Texas, and our two elected officials on the Senate side have really played the politics way too long, and we've just given up on Cruz totally. We think we're wasting our effort. But Cornyn, I think he wants to do the right thing, and he thinks that if the Senate flips to the Republican side in the midterms, he'll be Senate Majority Leader, and he probably will be, and maybe he can help us if he gets that, because he really wants to be Senate Majority Leader and probably President too. Who knows? So there's a lot of politics, but we just keep fighting. Let's keep fighting.
There are actually things though that can be done at the state and local level. Stan touched on one: driver's licenses. You can issue driver's licenses to the undocumented, and that not only provides them with a form of identification, but it allows them to move so they can find the best job, even if it's one that's still in the shadows. If you have a mobile workforce, it's better, right? It's better for everyone. You can look at things around health policy, for example. There's been some counties, mostly on the West Coast, that have set up, free health clinics and things like that are really designed to be there for the undocumented communities, so that they come in and get treatment before their cases get so severe that they have to go to the emergency room, and it saves money in the long run. So there are some things like that states can do, or local governments can do. And of course, in Texas, we saw, what's now known as the Sanctuary Cities, effort. That was simply a case where local law enforcement, speaking to what Stan was talking about earlier, said, we're not going to act as federal, border enforcement or customs enforcement agents, because that's not our job. That's not our jurisdiction. And we need people in immigrant communities to talk to us when they see a crime, when they, we need them to feel safe talking to local police. And so, that was something that a lot of cities, including Houston, basically made a deliberate effort to draw a line between federal and local policy. And then, of course, our state officials overrode it and decided that local control wasn't something we should have. But I think there are some things like that can be done at the local level. But in terms of meaningful reform, it has to come from the feds. I think somebody, yeah.
I appreciate this talk so much, because I care so much about the undocumented workers who are here. Last week, I went to Home Depot, and it's my first trip there in a really long time. And I was shocked by the number of men I saw standing outside in the late morning looking for a job. And I realized that's multiplied by, I don't know what, with 750,000 coming into Texas every year, right? I want to help these people in the right way, But my concern is a policy that might incentivize this illegal immigration. I don't want to encourage it with the thought of all you have to do is get across the border and you're home free, for one. And also there should be some consequences. Maybe it could be you will never be a citizen if you were undocumented in that path or something. But the rule follower in me sort of balks at the idea that someone who came here in an undocumented, I don't like using the word illegally, but that's what it is, right? The ones who stayed at home in apprehension or followed the rules versus the ones who just took the risk. Have you given any thought? I think immigration policy might be better if there were some consequences for not following the rules.
First of all, part of the reason they're not following the rules is because there is essentially no effective way to come here legally if you're coming from Latin America in particular. There is no line. There's no way that most folks will get through the process in their lifetime. So, they're coming here out of desperation. They're coming here because there's no other way to get here. So that gets back to the fact that our immigration laws just aren't doing what they're designed to do. But in terms of this idea of, yes, okay, but nevertheless, you broke the law and you're here. And before we just say, oh, forget about it, there should be a consequence. A lot of groups have looked at this and it's actually a relatively easy fix. You could create a process where in order to apply for citizenship, you first have to settle up, if you will, on this issue of your status. And that might include paying a fine. Now there's all kinds of debate about how big a fine that should be, but we can find a reasonable solution there, right? The problem is there's no incentive to do that. It gets back to what I was saying earlier about de facto amnesty. There's too many people that are just fine with the way the system is, and they don't care about the guys standing around at Home Depot. It's also incumbent upon all of us as we engage in this process to try to do the right thing as much as we can. I had, when I bought my house, I had a new roof put on, and the guy who was running the crews decided to split the crew between my house and another house. So instead of 4 guys, I suddenly had 2 guys. I knew what he was doing. He was double dipping, right? But then he was trying to get the 2 guys that were working on my roof to work harder. And it's, August, and they're up on a roof. And I'm like, no, I want them taking breaks. I made sure they had water. I don't want somebody dying on my roof because some guy's trying to make an extra buck. So, there are things you can do. I mean, that's a small thing and it probably didn't change anything, but at the very least, when you talk about it, these are people and you want them treated humanely. And we all want to work in a humane working environment. And so you can at least take some steps to ensure that happens. You're right. The rule followers and all of us are upset about this. Like, we don't want there to just be some sort of backdoor way to come into America, not have any consequence for breaking the rules to get here. But I think we also have to recognize the system in which this is operating in is so fundamentally flawed at this point and has been so unmaintained for so long that it's just not working at all.
And I have an instance in my book, our book, where I'll never forget this. Renette, my wife's in the back, we building a new fence in the yard. And I got a bid from a really reputable fence guy for like $10,000. And I got a bid from another guy for $7,000. And I looked into it and I found out, well, the $10,000 bid is paying taxes, has workman's comp. And the other guy getting his people up at Home Depot and he's building it. Now, should I take that $3,000 savings and put it in my pocket? Well, I'd be a hypocrite. Mm-hmm. But are most people going to spend an extra $3,000 if they're putting a roof on or a kitchen? Or no, they're just going to take the low bid. So people are being, you can call it exploitation, you can call it economic, but it's not right. And it is I believe in the letter of the law too, but there really isn't a law right now. It is so convoluted, and it's not going to change. And and it's interesting. Back in Immigration Reform Act of 1986, there were 3 million undocumented eligible for a path to citizenship. It wasn't amnesty. it was a path to citizenship. And only about 600,000 took advantage of it. Most people didn't want to be citizens. They just wanted to work and raise their families. They don't want to vote. You know, they just want to work and raise their families. And so those people that didn't take advantage of that path to citizenship can wake up 20 years later and they're being deported. So nobody enforced the rules. I mean, that was a broken rule. I mean, Reagan did it. Really smart senators did it, but it wasn't thought out more.
Even when you follow the rules, it can often be very difficult and unfair. Someone really dear to me was born in Argentina. She came here when one of her parents had a job with Arthur Anderson, came here legally. You know, Enron happened, lost the job. And then her parent went back to school, got a job as a teacher so her kids could stay here, did everything legally. Her daughters are now citizens, but the mom, because someone in the school district was kind of doing things under the table, her immigration status is kind of tainted because of this employee. And so even following the rules and the year-long process, years long, you know.
Well, I'll tell you, a good friend of mine, undocumented lady, I've known for 30 years, and her daughter's legal and teaches at KIPP. And she came to me yesterday. She was all excited. She heard on Telemundo that for $1,200, she has a lawyer that will help her get her papers. I said, Maria, wait a minute now. And this woman spent probably $20,000 through the years trying to get her papers, and every time he gets it through. And I said, you know, you need to check this out because there's really no way. Even though you've been here 30 years and you have an American-born daughter, the process, there's no way. You're just going to give him $1,200 and he's going to, you know, so, but she'll try anyway.
We had a podcast guest a few weeks ago who I thought put it very well. She said that the American immigration system is like a freeway. It has a lot of off ramps and very few on ramps, and it doesn't take much to find yourself, you know, booted off the road. The slightest slip up, and you know, it's very, very hard to get back on.
Alrighty. Hi, Alondra. Nice to be here. My question is on the series that y'all are doing on YouTube. I'm wondering if that is available in different languages, being that education is such an important part of grassroots organizing and how we're going to ultimately get people in power to listen to us. You know, I'm the daughter of an immigrant, and I would love for my, you know, parents to be informed, as well as just the immigrant community at large. And for that to be possible, we obviously know that we need that in many different languages, being that, you know, immigrants.
Well, we thought about doing it in Spanish. Of course, it costs money, and we're really trying to, you know, be diligent in the use of our funds. But if you really think about it, the people who can vote, the people that really need to hear the story, are the people we're trying to reach, because they're the ones that need to call the politicians. And the nice thing is, so many of our young kids now, like you know, every year that the year goes on, we got more kids like you turning 18 can vote. And you know, the kids that are here are learning English. I mean, maybe not as good as they should sometimes. And unfortunately, the undocumented parents are sort of being neglected. But I never forget, Sylvia Garcia told me, he says, Dan, one of the worst things that have happened to our Latino community with Telemundo, because now they don't need to learn English. And I thought about that at the time. It didn't make much sense, but I see it now, because people get so dependent on the news services in their own language. And I don't blame them. I mean, you know, you trust them. You don't trust Fox necessarily. But you know, it's just amazing how many people have been here 20, 30, 40 years and still don't speak English. And that's tough. That's tough. Last question.
I'm sitting here as a mom, so our professor wants to come and I'm in the course where it's basically about demographics. So he wanted me to ask all the questions that Mark's here. I wrote, you talked a lot about how undocumented contribute to housing and economy by pay taxes. So correlated to that. So of course, how do you think that would affect immigrants that are forced to keep labor for compensation because they're scared of all these
Such a simple question. No, seriously, it's a very complicated issue. Of course, if everybody had legal status, they could go to the police, you know. And what I see in my travels is there are areas in our city that are primarily undocumented people. And it's really easy for a cartel member or for a bad guy to go into those communities and bring a bunch of girls, you know, sell them into prostitution, all the cantinas, all that good stuff, because the people they live around are scared to go to the police. You know, and most of these people, drug people, selling drugs, you know, they would go to the police if they had legal status. They get these druggies out of them. We don't want these. They're messing up our kids. But because they don't have legal status, they won't access the police. It drives the police crazy. I was talking to Adrian about Garcia about when he was sheriff about the cantinas. They said, can't y'all shut them down? I said, Stan, there's 289 cantinas in Houston. And every time we shut one down, 3 more pop up. I mean, the human trafficking, this is the human trafficking capital of the world. And that is terrible that these kids have to live with that. And they're so vulnerable, you know, and these cartels are bringing them over, you know, 15, 16, 17 years old, smuggling them in. And it's hopeless. I mean, it's not hopeless, but you gotta ID the people who are here to help us with the problem. Because we need every boot on the ground. Good question. Hey, Professor. You should be here too.
And my head is spinning. This is so multi-leveled in its implications that I feel like, I don't know how you feel, but I feel helpless, but I don't feel hopeless. I feel helpless, but I don't feel hopeless. My great hope comes because there are people like yourselves who have really thought this thing out in detail and can compartmentalize the possibilities of doing things. Going back to Larry Payne's observation about empathy, I think it's the first place that we have to begin in what I would call the grassroots mobilization. And what you're doing with these videos is precisely trying to stimulate people to grassroots so that they can grasp what it is that they can do concretely. That's the most important thing. What can I do concretely in this huge problem? Because otherwise I will get hopeless when I think about the gridlock of our Congress and what has happened to the politicians in this country, having no longer taking the status of statespersons, but being reduced merely to politicians in the most negative sense of that word, because politics is good. It's a good vocation. Everybody should be preparing for that. But I would encourage you to think about religious orders as potential persons who can educate other people into what you have discovered is possible. I would encourage every parish in the archdiocese or anywhere else to take your videos and show these to the people in the parish, because I think this is the way to evoke what's at the heart of the Good Samaritan parable, and that is precisely empathy, that you go beyond your boundaries and you're able to reach out to these people. So I'm going to follow up with you anyhow and try to grasp what I can do. What is it practically that I can do to move this thing along? And from my own point of view, I want to thank you profoundly, because I said before, you are precisely the example, the both of you, on what the Center for Faith and Culture stands for, how you take faith in the dignity of the human person and then see it in its very practical situation. Father Ben, I'm sorry, I didn't want to take the last word.
It's okay. It's good that you do that, Father. First of all, I just want to just do a summary. I think Father Nesti mentioned that from every pen, empathy. When we begin to see the other person as our brothers and sisters, acknowledge their dignity, intrinsic dignity as a human person. Recently, I discovered there are 3 definitions for dignity. One is intrinsic dignity, the other one attributed dignity, and the third one is inflorescent dignity. And I was thinking about that, and because I came from the country which basically very much, social justice is really abused, totalitarian system, and I was the victim of that. And I think a lot of political leaders, was attributed with a role, with a dignity as being a leader. But sometimes I think in that my reflection, I think a person needs to acknowledge intrinsic dignity, and secondly, he must have the inflorescent dignity. That means he have to embody the virtues of the good citizen of America, have to see the common good, acknowledge solidarity, and also work hard to transcend a kind of group dynamic or group bias. And I think in order for that for a person to have attributed dignity, that he must have that inflorescent dignity, have embodiment of the virtues. So I think the problem I see from your sharing is that sometimes we elected a lot of political leaders who are very good in words, but they are not really good in actions. They are not really walk the talk. So I'm just think empathy is important, and the center, Father Nesti has been reminding us all the time, we need to rely on the church teachings on the dignity of the human person created in God's image and the value of each one of us. And I think it's important for us to be able, just like he just mentioned, the church, local church here, need to collaborate with all of the community partnerships, to be able to provide something which not simply change the local structure, but change the federal structure, and be able to facilitate the process of changing the policy that change the life of the people. And there's a lot of people who are victimized by the system, which is unjust, unfair, disrespected of their own dignity. So I think there's a lot of work here. And I mean, the sharing today make me recognize there's no simple problem anymore. It's very complicated, and it requires the collaboration of many, many people. And I just want the same thing like Father Nesti is saying, the church needs to really take leadership in organizing this kind of change of mindset, change of bias. And if we don't change the mindset, we cannot change the policy, because people are very much influenced by that. So I just want to thank Father Nesti for inviting the two of you to be a part of this. And this dialogue is so important. Just like he said, he's feel helpless sometimes, but he's full of hope, because at least there you Stan, and you Lauren, doing a lot of good work, and then Larry Payne here and many people. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you all of the participants online.